Welcome to Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben, where each week it's my great pleasure to meet fascinating people who tell us about the challenges they're facing with their work-life balance. I'm Dr. Ben Sinclair, and I wonder, do you struggle with your priorities? On the one hand, focusing on your work, business or career, namely your wealth, or on the other hand, looking after your health, which is so important. Over the past 20 years as a GP, I've seen many people spending too long on their screens, cutting corners on their sleep, diet or exercise. The result? Their work life's going well, but their health can suffer. I sincerely hope that my guests' personal and professional experiences may help you to improve your own health and life. My guest today is Rachel Jessey, a registered naturopath and nutritionist with an interest in long COVID and chronic illness, and she's got 14 years experience in nutrition and integrative healthcare. I'm delighted to announce that as well as running her own consultancy, Rachel is also now a part of Dr. Finlay's team with her long COVID expertise. So Rachel, welcome to the show.
Oh.
Great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
It's so good to have you. Now, I know you're up at 5:30 every morning and you make a daily walk at sunrise and you don't switch on any electronic devices until 9 a.m. And I wonder how many of our listeners can claim that.
Not many.
I don't think so. No, but tell us, why do you do that?
So it was really something that happened this year. And I know after being questioned today for this podcast that I still need to do a lot of other things. But it was really this year. I've been in the long COVID space for 4 years now. And in that time, I've not had a single break. Even on holidays, it's been absolutely crazy, and my health has kind of taken a backward slant because of it. So yeah, I just decided I'm going to have to remove some of this tech use that I'm on, because I'm on computers the whole time. If I'm not on computers, I'm on social media. So it had consumed everything.
It's a bit like a digital detox, I think.
Yeah, it started off as a digital detox, and what happened as a consequence of that was my health completely elevated. You could argue that I'm perimenopausal now. I was having symptoms, all of that disappeared. So yeah, it's become my non-negotiable now to ensure that I get up and see that sunrise every single day and I don't look at my phone. Yeah, it's just part of my daily routine now.
Wow. Now, you've mentioned sunrise is an important thing. Tell us a bit more about your expertise in circadian rhythms.
So the circadian rhythms are our 24-hour kind of cycles. So they run by the day and the night. And our rhythms are kind of entrained by the sun rising, the sun setting, and the different spectrums of light throughout the day, but also the signals that we get when the sun's going down and at night time as well. And of course, when you think about women, their cycles are tied in with the moon cycles, the tides are tied in with the moon cycles. So not only humans, animals, birds, we're all kind of tied in with those rhythms.
Wow. So what would your approach to sort of those good health habits be? I mean, you talked about some very natural base there with working with nature. Tell me a bit more about your sort of concept of that.
In the sense of how I entrain my rhythms, or how I would potentially get someone else to entrain their rhythms?
Well, often what we do is what we then promote. So what do you do for you, and what might you do for a client?
Yeah, so for myself now, it's about, okay, I want to get up and I want to see the sunrise every day. So I don't even need to set an alarm now. My circadian rhythm has fallen in line so much that I now wake up with the sun.
So your body's waking you up at the right time. So my body
is actually waking me up at the right time. So what I then do, I have a dog. So me and my husband, we get up, we walk the dog, and we just make sure we look to the east and we walk towards the sunrise, and we'll sit and watch it, walk the dog. We're out for normally about 45 minutes, and then we'll eat breakfast. So this is the other part of the circadian rhythm, is that because we have cortisol that is coming up at that time of the day, it's really important that we we eat food, so we're not relying on cortisol to carry us through the rest of the day. So we're kind of putting food into the body to also provide that energy that we need through the rest of the day.
And cortisol's that sort of hormone that wakes you up and gets you going?
Yeah, so cortisol, you'll hear a lot of things about cortisol being a negative thing in the healthcare space, but actually we do need cortisol to kind of give us that motivation, get ourselves out of bed, get ourselves going, because if that wasn't there, we would probably be fatigued. We would probably be quite sluggish in the morning, which a lot of my clients and a lot of our patients are likely going to experience with long COVID.
Now, tell us more. You talked about walking towards the sun in the east, so I'm thinking, you live somewhere beautiful.
Yes.
Tell us more about where you were born. I heard you grew up in Southampton near the New Forest with its wonderful wildlife and deer and badgers. How was that for you?
Yeah, well, it was good. It was brilliant that we were able to grow up in such a beautiful space. We lived near the New Forest. We were there most weekends and evenings, and it was a wonderful experience. But yes, deers and badgers, so they carry ticks. Didn't really think anything of it, and I just remember my dad would always be the one, because my mum would completely freak out over it. But my dad would always kind of get the vodka out, and he was picking ticks out of me all the time. But we never thought anything of it. And really, I didn't think anything of it until my health had really deteriorated in my early 20s. And it was that whole concept was revisited when I went to see a naturopath.
So, like most teenagers, you had fun in your teens, and you let your hair down a bit, but you ended up facing some medical challenges in your 20s. Tell us more about what happened, what transpired.
Yeah, so I was I left home at 17 under not great circumstances, and so I was kind of out there on my own, fending for myself, so to speak. But in the kind of lead up, sort of in my kind of younger years leading up to kind of my later teens, early 20s, I just experienced really bizarre symptoms, and I thought that was mainly related to the fact that I was burning the candle at both ends. I was out partying all weekend, drinking, just being a reprobate generally. So I didn't really put it down to anything, and my symptoms started getting worse. So I was having very extreme panic attacks. I was constantly in fear of my life because of those panic attacks, because I was thinking I was going to have a heart attack or a stroke. And then I started to get facial paralysis. I started to get numbness and tingling in my arms and my legs. And so it started getting quite scary. So I had kind of various visits to the doctor. And I was diagnosed with things like migraine and stress. And, because I didn't weigh very much, I was told that I had an eating disorder. And so, all of these things happened until I actually lost the vision in my eye. So it was quite a bizarre experience, because I thought I developed a cataract. That's exactly what it felt like.
Wow.
So I went to the optician and said, I think I've got cataracts. And she went, I don't think you have. I think you're going to have to go to the eye hospital. So she was really great. She referred me straight away for MRIs. And that was, at that point, I was diagnosed with optic neuritis and subsequently multiple sclerosis as a part of all of that journey, really.
It's quite a scary diagnosis, being diagnosed with MS. How old were you when you
I was in my early 20s at that point. So it was... I don't know, it's really, because I look back on it now, it's taken a long time. I mean, I haven't really spoken about this until I kind of wrote my bio on my website, because I had counselling and things like that. And they said, you need to share your story because it's relatable for other people. So it's only something that I brought out because I haven't wanted to identify with that diagnosis, because one, I didn't feel that it was the right diagnosis, and two, I didn't want that to then carry on through the rest of my life, and I wanted to do something about it.
Understand.
So that's when I visited a naturopath, because all the kind of doctors could offer me were medications and just hope for the best.
Now, you mentioned that you had lots of tick bites, and you've inferred there's a sort of a link between tick bites and neurological problems like you were having. So tell us more about the journey towards another diagnosis.
Yeah, I hadn't made that link at that point. And at this point, I hadn't got into kind of any natural therapy. I was still not really looking after myself very well. So, I consulted with a naturopath, and she was just, it was really quite a bizarre consultation, because she just kind of picked apart my whole health history. She realised that I'd been around the New Forest and I'd had these tick bites. And so she then sent me off for testing, and it came back that I was positive for Lyme.
Now, Lyme disease is caused by a Borrelia bacteria.
Yeah.
So when the tick bites you, in goes the bacteria into your bloodstream, and then it causes all these neurological problems.
Yeah, and because I had ticks in me for a long time, because they would be quite big by the time I realised they were there, obviously that transmission time was a lot more prolonged. If you can get a tick out quickly, the risk is a lot more diminished. And of course, when I found that out, I found out that the New Forest was a Lyme
disease hotspot. Yep.
As are many places in the UK now. So I think it's one of these conditions that goes misdiagnosed quite a lot, based on my own experience and the experience that I see in clinical practice as well.
And it's quite scary, the stats I read in some research papers about the carriage of Lyme bacteria in ticks plus other bacteria like Bartonella and Babesia.
Yeah.
And in Scotland, there's 100% prevalence in ticks of those bacteria.
I didn't actually know that.
If you get bitten by a tick in Scotland, it's definitely worth seeking help, even if you haven't had a big red mark, because you need to think about whether you may have been inoculated with these dangerous bacteria that then often months or years later can come back to bite you and cause all this stuff that looks like MS.
Yeah.
Now, tell me how you got into nutritional therapy then, because so you saw a naturopath. Did that spark an interest?
Yeah, so she obviously, I didn't hold anything back from the consultation. So she was privy to my going out habits, drinking habits, food habits. It was a mess. And so she just trained me on how to look after myself and how to eat, how dangerous alcohol was for me, how my lifestyle was kind of detrimental, partying all the time and not sleeping properly. I guess a circadian rhythm reset right there. And so she put me on the path to nutrition, and I can't tell you how quickly I felt so much better. And my panic just went, the whole anxiety, all of my symptoms completely diminished over time. So it was testament to me how powerful these tools were. So that's when I started my journey into researching naturopathy and then nutrition. And then I had a real passion at that point for nutrition. So that was the arm that I wanted to go down, but I specifically chose nutritional therapy over dietetics because I didn't want to be bound by
the establishment or the limitations.
Yeah, that's a good word, because it's quite limited. So I wanted to have that freedom to kind of express from a research perspective and just explore some of these conditions that are not necessarily as recognised.
Rachel, after a nutritional therapy diploma and further studies in nutrition sciences, you set up your own consultancy. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I set up the consultancy in 2010. So that was actually after my diploma, and I completed more of my studies as I was practicing as well. So I went on to do my nutrition science and then did a personalised nutrition master's degree. So that took a few years because I had children in amongst all of this as well. So yes, my practice was quite part-time. And then when I completed my master's, I went full-time completely with that. And it coincided with the time that COVID was just about to hit. So prior to that, we'd been in Portugal. My son had got sepsis. So at that point, he was really, really poorly and he spent a long time in hospital, and I was trying to help him recover. And when he did recover and we got him home, there was a lot of research that I did within the gut microbiome. And so that then got me into the gut microbiome for long COVID.
Welcome back to Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben. And for those of you just joining us, I'm with Rachel Jessey, a registered naturopath and nutritionist with an interest in long COVID and chronic illness. Now, you mentioned that you'd set up a consultancy. What's it called?
It's called Be Nourished.
Tell us a bit more about the name.
So the name, I was very lucky because obviously I set the clinic up in 2010. And so there wasn't a lot of nutrition practices out there, so I was playing around with names, and the original one was Nourish Me, and that had gone. So I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to think of something else. And then Be Nourished just came from the ether, as we call it, and it was available, and I just went with it, and it really resonated because yes, although I focus a lot on nutrition, actually for me nourishment extends far more further than just nutrition itself. It encompasses, everything to do with health. It's
a lovely word, isn't it? It's quite broad, and it brings in lots of different elements of health.
Absolutely.
So what sort of clients are you working with? And tell us a bit more about that, how you support them, and also tell us a bit more about your new role at Dr. Finlay's.
Yes, so there's a lot there. It's really exciting. I'm going to touch on the work with you first up, because this is a really exciting development for my clinical practice to be collaborating with people like yourself. You're an expert in your field, and I think it's really important to have that multidisciplinary team. I think this is what I've noticed from working on my own in my clinical practice, is that missing element was people like yourself to kind of refer to just share case studies and just have that little bit of support as well. So that's really invaluable. What I do at the moment and what I have specialised in over the last 4 years is long COVID and chronic illness, because I think that has exploded. Long COVID has shone a light on chronic illness. I think the chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia space has suddenly got people advocating and people who are researching and people who are looking into this space a lot more. So long COVID has kind of had that benefit, although it's not a benefit, but you see what I mean.
I feel like it's got legs,
absolutely,
isn't it?
Yeah. So it's kind of validated a whole group of people. And so what I do with people, and what I have been doing over the last 4 years, is delving deeply into the gut microbiome and how that interacts with the prolongation of chronic illness.
And what I remember is when I had long COVID, I saw this video from you, and you were talking about the gut microbiome, you were talking about pathways, and I thought, oh, that's the sort of nutritionist I'd like to work with. And then I got ill, lost my memory, got amnesia, and then basically came round, and then someone said, oh, you should speak to Rachel Jessey. And then I rediscovered you. And I was like, oh, this is exactly the missing part of our multidisciplinary team. Aww. So a bit like you said, it's great to have different health professionals in a team seeing things who are similar but different and objective. And that gives us such a fantastic angle on all these health problems. We've got the psychologist for more the pure mental health bit that relates to the physical but more mental. We've got Rachel working on all of the nutritional gut microbiome bit to take it way deeper than I would as a doctor. And then we've got myself sort of overseeing the collaborations, and trialing some pharmaceuticals. And I recovered from long COVID using a nutritional approach. So I advocate that, from the beginning. Yeah. And actually, that's why we're working together, which is great. So tell us more about what you do for clients. Suppose I referred someone to you for a long COVID consultation, what would you do for them?
So first up, I'm interested in their day-to-day routine. I'm interested in their circadian rhythms, because I want to know whether they're sleeping okay, if they're able to get outside at all. So a lot of people are actually housebound and bedbound. So that can be a real problem when we're trying to retrain the circadian rhythms. because I find that some people are actually so sensitive that it's really hard to get the right nutrition in them straight away. So we have to take a step back and try and retrain the body into some kind of rhythm to then enable them to be able to digest and absorb their food appropriately. So you might look at things like supplementation. I use a lot of things like red light therapy, blocking the blue light, because a lot of people when they come in, come indoors and they're poorly, they will spend a lot of time on screens.
And it's the only way they can access their community.
100%.
Because we consume this sort of, I remember I was lying there listening to podcasts, all 100%. I could do. And you've got blue blocking glasses on.
Yes.
I've got a blue film on mine because that, reduces the negative blue light. Now, I knew a lot about blue light affecting sleep, but you're quite into red light, and that got me into red light too.
Yeah, red light and the visible spectrum as well. When we look at the light that's available from the sun, we have the infrared spectrum, which we can't see, and the UV spectrum that we can't see. And then we have the visible spectrum, which is made up of the rainbow colours. So our eyes have photoreceptors on them that send that light signal to our brain, and then that brain tells the rest of the body what it needs to do. So for instance, blue light in the natural spectrum will help us to produce cortisol. So that's our motivation, and we want that because blue light is available to us during the day. So we want to have cortisol available for that motivation, to kind of get us going, to keep us awake and alert throughout the day. But what we don't want it is at night time from artificial lights.
Right, and that makes so much sense with the sleep hygiene advice that we were told to give out as GPs.
Absolutely.
Try and switch off screens. But actually, I suppose what you should do is make sure that you're not wearing your blue blocking glasses when you're getting out in the morning, because you want that wakefulness.
You want the wakefulness.
And so my routine is to have a cold plunge and stand there, hopefully in the sunshine. In Britain, it's not always there.
It's not always available.
Look towards the sun and stand there in a sort of a warrior posture to try and get my testosterone up and my cortisol going early in the morning. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's part of, we have a lot of red light available to us and infrared available. Infrared's available all day, but we get a lot of infrared at that time of the day and in the evening as the sun is setting.
So we should be living more outdoors?
Absolutely. Since I've been doing all of this myself, I try and spend as much as I can outdoors. I've built an office outdoors, so I've built an outdoor space where I can go even during the winter time, which is going to be undercover. So that's kind of my project for this year. But equally, things like tanning, safe tanning, making sure that you've got that UVB, which gives us the vitamin D during the summer months, because that's not available to us during the winter. But infrared actually helps to entrain our skin to be able to receive that UVB, so it can actually help to prevent burning. So I think there's so much within the light and within our sun exposure that we're not really appreciating with regards to kind of safe tanning and also optimizing our health.
And look at you, you've got a lovely tan. And what's fascinating is this epitomizes the balance in health versus wealth. You've got to balance. It's not a black and white thing where you just avoid the sun altogether. You've got to go deeper than that.
Yes.
And we're all wearing, factor 50 sunblock. What's that doing to our vitamin D absorption? Because actually we're living indoors. Most people I test are chronically low in vitamin D.
Absolutely.
So we need to balance that out.
We do. And, this is a big problem for the UK and Northern Hemispheres in general. But I did find some really fascinating research in that we can make our own UVB through cold thermogenesis. So this is how people in the Northern Hemisphere have actually adapted to living in the Northern Hemisphere by being cold adapted. But what do? We go in our houses, we turn up our heating, we put on loads of clothes, and we have become... We've disassociated from the cold. So that's my next journey. Is I'm going to try and get cold adapted for the winter. Yeah.
One of the keys to my recovery was cold thermogenesis. I listened to Wim Hof's autobiography, and I just thought, I think I need this, because I've always loved cold water. I used to swim in the sea in Scotland as a kid, in all weathers, whatever time of year, and I used to love getting in the cold, and I think I've got Viking genes, and so I'm probably well adapted as a Celtic Viking to this. So I think so actually that'd be really interesting to get you back, Rachel, and talk about your journey through cold thermogenesis.
That would be good.
Unconsciously, probably what I've been doing is creating my own UVB internally, which is great.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that helps natural killer cells.
It helps everything.
Now, I'm coming back to you. We could talk all day about the interests and things, and we have podcasts to talk about that separate to this.
Yes.
I'm always interested in the business owner themselves. How many hours do you work? How are you balancing that out? How are you balancing your health and your wealth? You scored yourself 8 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10, actually, which is one of the highest scores we've had. So tell me about your own work-life balance.
So we'll cover work-life balance in a minute, because I want to caveat this a little bit, because I wasn't very well about a year ago. I wasn't feeling particularly great. I had iron deficiency anemia, quote unquote perimenopausal, and wasn't in a very good place. And this is where I kind of found the circadian resetting and doing all of this retraining, because my nutrition has always been on point. There was just something missing. So it was actually that balance between the outdoors and the indoors which actually resolved all of those issues. I don't have anemia anymore. My perimenopausal symptoms have completely gone. Everything's completely normalised. I'm cycle syncing with the moon, all of that. So that was a really interesting journey. However, I do have a very bad tendency to overwork. And this was highlighted to me quite recently. I think when you're interviewed for your own life, because I work with other people and I'm helping other people, I do ignore my own needs, I guess. But yes, I work probably 70 hours a week. I'm actually working, researching, working, writing client plans, and I enjoy it. This is the thing. So where people would sit and watch telly for 2 or 3 hours, I'm reading research papers.
And I think the thing is, it drives us, the knowledge drives us, the interest drives us, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I can totally relate to that, because there's so many things out there now that you could read, that you could, and they're so accessible. In the old days, you would have had to have a barrier there where you go, right, I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to pull out this paper.
Absolutely.
No longer. You can just sit there in the comfort of your own home. I mean, I get papers sent to me all the time. I've had to basically put them into Fridays so that I spend 2 hours on Fridays reading research, and that's what I do. Now, what action have you taken since you felt you were overworking? What have you done to balance this out?
So I have made a day now where I don't do anything, which is going to be on Fridays. I always kept it kind of for admin day, but actually I'm going to make sure that that's the day for me and the dog, and we're just going to go out and for the whole day and just do stuff in nature and do the things that I enjoy. So I love foraging, and I love identifying plants, and I love gardening, and I love being by the sea. So all of those things are going to come in on that day. And I think I'm just going to say no a lot more. So I'm booked up now for quite a long time, and people will contact me and they'll be like, I want to get in to see you, and I'll be like, right, well, you can go to Dr. Finlay's and book in that way. Or from my perspective in my clinic, I can't take anyone else on, where I'd probably try and make the time to fit. So this is why it's been really great to come on board with you, because you have a booking system and you have someone kind of managing all of that, which is really great, because it's kind of having that go-to to say, actually, no, there's no appointments. You'll have to book in. And
those boundaries, finally, really, as part of winding this up, I think the boundaries in that health-wealth balance are absolutely key. Once you identify one, then you can take action on it. And it sounds like you're actually on a journey towards better balance with those boundaries in place. Yeah,
and I've actually got a couple of weeks off coming up as well, and I'm going to have those 2 weeks off.
And that's really good. And I would encourage everyone to take proper breaks and book them in. Yeah. Sadly, Rachel, that's all we've got time for today, but I'd love you to come back and talk to us more. There's so many different topics I think would be relevant to our listeners, both in chronic illness and long COVID. Yeah. But I want to thank you for coming in today. It's been lovely talking to you.
It's been really good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I do hope you enjoyed today's episode of Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben. And I hope it may help you improve your life and health. You can also take one easy step by achieving that right now by subscribing free on your usual podcast platform. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me on podcast@drfinlays.co.uk. I hope you'll join me again, but for now, it's goodbye from me, Dr. Ben.